what I thought was really interesting about that tour was, that was, I mean, at that moment, like, hands down, that's the biggest tour I've ever been a part of. And, kudos to those guys because they're doing their thing and they're doing it well. What I was nervous about that, before that tour was like, well, we don't really sound like anyone else is on the bill. Granted, it was a very diverse bill, which was really cool. So we weren't like, hey, here's 4 super heavy bands, and then here's This Is Hell, who's fast, hardcore punk metal band. It's like, so what was really refreshing about that tour is it seemed like the kids who came were just super psyched to be at a show, and not so much a show, at a concert. Like, this was like a rock concert. Like, I remember going to see like Incubus play when I was in high school and being like, wow, this is so cool. This is a spectacle. This is a rock and roll spectacle. And that's, on a smaller level, I feel like that's what the AP tour was. And it was, I would say 75% of those shows were like, this is really cool. Then another like 20% was like, this is fucking insane. Like, we played, like, I remember just off the top of my head, like Fort Lauderdale. I had like, I didn't really have any expectations of anything, but Fort Lauderdale was insane. Like, a kid like ripped his shirt off in the middle of one of our songs and like flung it in the balcony. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is mayhem right now. And then, you 5% of shows, which is you can't win them all. But it's like that tour was so, like, it was refreshing because it was, you had young kids that are fans of, like, August Burns Red and Bring Me the Horizon that probably would never have picked up a This Is Hell CD. And, you look out and you get to see a couple kids in This Is Hell tank top. You're like, oh, it's pretty cool. Like, that kid digs our band now, maybe, or he just likes the tank top. So it's like, whatever, it's still cool. It's like, it was refreshing. The open-mindedness that I saw, I think, was refreshing.
On the AP tour, the kid that ripped off his shirt, are there other tour stories from that?
Oh, man.
I remember that Chicago show was crazy.
Chicago show was a ton of fun. One thing I remember that we used to try and do every show on that tour is, it was, we would play 3 blocks of 3 songs, and at the end of our second block, we had a song that, before we go into it, Rick Wood just does like a, like a fast picking thing on the guitar, and it was always so fun that Travis would get on the mic and he'd stand up in the front and he'd go, "Where are all my metalheads?" and having like all these young kids throw up the metal horns like that, and it was like, sometimes, you'd get a good reaction, other times it was like the whole place would do it, and you're like, this is insane, so funny. It's like, I feel like I'm Metallica right now, like, crazy
cool.
stuff.
Yeah, those kids were cool. They were very just like very psyched and very enthusiastic. There was no like pretense. Certain circles of hardcore, it's so pretentious, and it's like, dude, like, especially as a hardcore band, like, we're all off to the side of like the larger world.
Mm-hmm.
So there should be no pretense. You know what I'm saying? And doing those shows, it's funny going into that show being like, oh, this is fucked up. We're like a hardcore band playing these like, big like metalcore bands and melodic bands. Like, this is weird. But instead of that, we were like, no, this is sick. This is going to be so much fun. The kids were open to it. I think because we went into it also not being like, oh, we're like a hardcore band and like, fuck you guys, like, we're better than you. Like, that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the crowd reacted well because we just went up there and had a really good time with them. And
or at least try our best to win them over.
Yeah.
Which I'd say, we accomplished most of the time, which was cool. It's like, hey, man, if you guys are here to listen, we'll play for you, so fuck it.
When you play big shows like that, in which way does it influence the writing process, particularly with the new album?
I don't really think it does. I think I'm too selfish and stubborn to think about stuff like that. It's that thing that after like a new song's written, you can kind of think of it in different ways, but not type of thing where I would think to go back and be like, oh, we should change this because it would go over better with this crowd.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of the type of thing where like you write a song, you're finished, you're like, oh man, that's gonna be like a sick pit part at like a hardcore show.
Mm-hmm.
You just think of it like, yo, we played that at like this type of show, like we might get this type of reaction. And that's kind of cool. Like, and that's been a cool thing about the band from the beginning. We were never afraid to kind of play to different people and, be a part of different things instead of like, we're a hardcore band, we'll only play hardcore shows. And the thing that I think is really cool about that is we got a lot of shit about that from that when we first started doing stuff like that. People be like, why do you always tour these types of bands? And it's not always. We essentially do like half and half. But it's one of those things where it's like, hey, man, you can't just keep preaching to the same choir. That gets boring. Plus, in my opinion, hardcore isn't like oh, hardcore's only for these people. Hardcore is for everyone. You know, and it's only going to be a positive influence on almost everybody. But the thing that I think is cool is there's a lot of bands now that we're friends with, hardcore bands, that are like, yo, I want to like do what you guys do. Like I want to do not just straight hardcore tours. And that's always so like, I guess like when somebody says that at all, but if anybody ever says that to me and says, I want to do what you guys do, that makes me feel so good. You know, it makes me feel like, oh, it's cool that like other hardcore kids are appreciating what we're doing instead of thinking that we're like selling them out by like not just playing, you know, dingy, you know, 70 cap rooms with, you know, a hardcore band, like some random hardcore band that's gonna like, you know, grow out of it and be too cool for it in a month or a year, even though they're like, oh, hardcore till death, and anything that's not hardcore like sucks, because there's so much of that, you know. It's a very young scene, you know. Hardcore has always been for, you know, for the youth, which is sick, but what comes with that is, you know, to a lot of people it's a phase, you know. So it's really cool when there's other bands that are taking it more than just a phase and want to, you know, expand on it and not just be like, all right, well, this is the box and I'm stuck inside of it. And they're like, oh, I want to go there and I want to go there and I want to do that. I always think that's really cool.
I think if you look at bands that are, you know, bigger in the hardcore scene, they don't just tour with hardcore bands. Like I've seen Terror out with Unearthed and Bleeding Through, and you know, Hatebreed goes out with Lamb of God, or like I know they took a Muir on tour to Canada. It's like, why, like I said, why would you just limit yourself to a select group of people when, who knows, your music could appeal to tons of different people? And I think, you know, that's excuse me, I think that's, you know, in my short time in This Is Hell, I think that's the beauty of the band is I don't think we've toured with one band that sounds anything like us, and I think that's really cool. We tour with a ton of bands that don't sound like us, but I think that's great. It's like, you know, us and Emarosa don't really have a whole lot in common, but hey, we, you know, toured with them on the AP tour and it was cool.
With that said, with writing this new album, was there a conscious effort to break out of the traditional framework of hardcore?
You know, I really don't think so. I think it just kind of happened. Same thing with Weight of the World. You know, when we started writing for Weight of the World, it just wound up being a little more thrashy. I remember wrote a couple songs. I'm like, all right, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. Then I wrote The Search, which is on that Warbird 7-inch. It was on Weight of the World also. And I remember, I think I wrote that in the van. Like we were like driving overnight to a show, and I'm just like fucking around with my guitar. And I'm like, oh, this is sick. They're like, what? I was like, yo, give me like 10 minutes. And I finished. I'm just like demoing the song. So I play it on the stereo. I was like, yo, check this out. This is sick. And I'm like, yo, that's cool. And it's kind of like it's Cro-Magsy, and you know, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna, this is sick. I'm gonna work on another song like this. So I did another song, little by little. Like I wound up like ditching the first couple of songs I wrote because they were kind of very in the Misfortunes style, and they were cool, but it was kind of like kind of blah. And thinking back after I started, you know, not paying attention of writing something that sounds like This Is Hell, I was like, I think I was writing those songs with intentions of like, this is what This Is Hell sounds like now. And I was like, This Is Hell sounds like whatever the fuck we write. So I was like, yo, fuck those songs. And we ditched them, and we just continued writing just what came naturally on Way to the World. And I was like, this is cool. We kind of like, it's different from our other stuff. It still sounds like This Is Hell, but it's like thrashier, a little more metal. And it was kind of like, yo, everyone else was like, this is cool, let's go with it. Like, all right. So we did that. And then when I started writing the new album, it was just like, hey, this is what I'm writing. Then I recorded a few songs. I was like, this is fucking thrash. Sounds like thrash metal. And I was even like, you know, maybe we shouldn't use this for This Is Hell. Like, it doesn't sound so much like a This Is Hell record. And everyone's like, yo, fuck that. Who gives a shit? Like, you know, we wrote this stuff, and I was like, yo, I'm into it. But I didn't, like, yeah, like, this is what we're going to do? It's like, yeah. Because it was like, it's so cool to write a record without having the mindset of it has to fit in with this or has to fit in with that. And you know, I think anything we do is going to sound like us, but the thing is, what us sounds like now is so broad. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure, like, there'll be a bunch of people who are still, like, stuck on sundowning that, like, oh, they totally, like, they sound like this now. It sucks. It's so stupid. Like, I only liked them back then. But I mean, you know, like, very seldomly, well, not even very seldomly, in a band situation, I've never written a song for anybody other than myself. You know, so like I wouldn't start doing that in 2011. Just like we didn't do that in 2006 when Sundown came out. We wrote Sundown because that's what we wanted to write.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and same thing with Misfortunes and Weight of the World. And this record's definitely different.
How does This Is Hell differ from Soldiers?
You know, I think of them as totally different, you know, because even like songwriting process is totally different. You know, we only share one member, you know, it's only me that's in both bands. You know, I sing in one band and I play guitar mainly in the other. From the beginning, This Is Hell was a band that we want to do a band to make this full-time life. Soldiers was, I see this band because I'm dying to say shit on a microphone. I wouldn't even say that Soldiers is more abrasive. You know, I think I might have said that a few years ago, but I think This Is Hell has become pretty confrontational and pretty abrasive. I mean those in positive ways.
A little off topic, but are there hardcore bands that have come out within the past couple years that you tip your hat off to?
I can think of just two, I guess, off the top of my head. You know, it might not be that they have just come out, but my exposure to them is new. One of the other bands I play in, we had toured with this band Foundation, they're making a ton of noise in hardcore, and you know, it's one of those things where you're like, well, this band is so hyped, like, what's it all about? And then seeing them live and seeing the reactions they get, it's like, yo, they deserve the hype because they're a fucking cool band. Like, they're a rad band. They're a great live show. They're tight as shit, and they got really cool songs. And then we just did Canada with Naysayer from Richmond, and Naysayer's another same thing. Like, they're a fucking cool band.
What do you think about bands like Touche Amore?
I think it's cool that in this time, or you know, but they've been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know they're just starting to like really blow up right now, but they've been around for a while. What they're doing, like, there's a bunch of bands kind of doing that style now. Like I said, when they first started, like, nobody was doing like that type of style since like I feel like the early to mid '90s type of screamo stuff. So I think it's cool that they're like, just, hey, this is what we're doing, and they're going out there because they're a different band. They're definitely a different type of band, and you know, I have a lot of respect for any band that goes out and does what they want, whether it fits in with something or not. I think it's sick that, you know, they're doing like extremely well right now. I feel like they're almost like starting, I want to say starting a new scene, but like, I don't know, I guess it maybe is almost like a different type of scene, you know, them and La Dispute, and I guess Defeater fits into that a bit, although I think of Defeater as a hardcore band.
What's interesting is, especially like in Defeater's case, I think it's like, what's so great is about the heaviness of them is, you know, they have parts that you're like, oh yeah, you know, you stomp your foot to it, but it's like, it's on the emotional level. Like, they have some stuff you're like, dude, that is heavy shit to listen to. Like, it's cool. It's like, I know, obviously, I think you want music that invokes some kind of emotion in you, whether it's, you know, happiness or sadness or wanting to get in the mosh pit or something like that. But I think, you know, a band that can do that, be it, you know, any kind of music, I think that is I think that's ultimately the most powerful part of what makes music. And it's cool when, you know, bands can do that, and it doesn't have to be, you know, all you motherfuckers in the pit,
Yeah.
eat your ass, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, not everyone has to be Bury Your Dead. Like, it's cool when, like, we played Crazy Fest earlier this year, and Defeater was playing the small stage, and the mic cut out during, I think, that song Dear Father, and it didn't matter because every single person in like the first 20 kids in the front row were screaming every single word at him, and he was just standing there yelling it back, and it's like, yo, that's so cool, like, that's great. Like, I was like, dude, that's like getting a little dusty over here on the side, like that's awesome, man. That's, people are that, you know, it's great. I love that.
Rules.
They just rule in general. They're a great band.
if a 17-year-old kid from, say, Louisville, Kentucky, since you mentioned Crazy Fest, if a 17-year-old kid were to come up to you and ask the course of action in which he should take to create a band and be successful, what would you say?
I would probably say I don't really know. Successful is such a marginal term. You know what I mean? Like, I guess it depends on what he means by successful. But I mean, if he's coming asking us and he considers us successful somehow, you have to really just go for it. You know what I mean? You can't overthink it. If you overthink it, then you get timid about things. Oh, maybe I should do this. Especially in our society, you're just told from the very beginning, you got to go to school, you got to go to college. Got to get into the best college, not because it's actually a better college, because you got to sink your money into something, so you could get a degree and then spend your whole life working to pay back your college. Like, where the fuck's the enjoyment in that? People consider that successful. That's bullshit.
I had a bit of a different experience than Rick did, but a similar thing. Like I went to school, did my 4 years of college, got a job out of school behind a desk, 401k, salary, health insurance, like all that shit, and I got the opportunity to play in this other band I play in, Enwell too, and when I got that opportunity, I was like, I sat down with my dad and I was like, Dad, I'm like, I've wanted to be a musician my whole life. Like, I grew up singing, playing guitar, piano, and I was like, when I graduated high school, I'm like, I need to do film, want to be a filmmaker, want to be in film. Went to film school, and after a while I was like, this is cool, like I'm going to finish my degree, but I'm like, I don't think I love this. And I actually had a professor come to me end of my senior year, and he's like, listen, he's like, you and I need to talk. I'm like, why is that? He's like, you talk about you being a filmmaker, not a musician. And I was like, right then and there, I was like, well, fuck film then. I mean, I still love movies. I'm like, but fuck that. I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not going to do it because this guy says I have to do it now. And then, here I am 2 years into my job with an opportunity to play in a band that tours full time. And I sat down with my dad. I was like, listen, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this. I thought he was going to have a fucking heart attack and all his hair was going to fall out.